Okay, I'll ask one more time. Is there anyone here who's wanting to speak on an item that hasn't signed up already? Anyone? Okay.
Hey, Dallas is going to bring you that. Oh, you have one. Oh, okay. Never mind. There it is.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. I would like to call to order the May 14th meeting of the Design Review Board. Will the board and ex officio members please introduce themselves? Starting with Cameron Bolin.
Cameron Bolin, AIA representative.
Perry Childress, East Tennessee Community Design Center.
Rick Blackburn, Historic Zoning Commission.
Matthew DeBard-Laban, Downtown Knoxville Alliance.
Mike Reynolds, Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
Lindsay Crockett, Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
Josh Wright, Urban Design Representative.
Suzanne Taravella, Neighborhood Representative.
Laura Cole, Downtown Resident Representative.
Jared Worsham, Downtown Resident Representative.
Chris Ford, Downtown Business Representative.
John Thurman, Downtown Development Representative.
Christina McGraw-Stillery, City Law Department.
Brian Berry, City of Knoxville Plans Review and Inspections Department.
Mark Reels, City of Knoxville Plans Review and Inspections.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. The minutes of the April 17th board meeting are provided in the agenda packet and have been distributed online. Are there any corrections or concerns about them?
I move to approve the minutes.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. I would like to say a little bit about conduct of hearing. The last meeting was a little bumpy since the bylaws obligate the chair to take the reins of the conduct of hearing. I wanted to try to do my job a little better and clarify that. So if you can put that up, Lindsay. So Article 5, hearing procedures. So my modifications are in blue. Section 2, appearances. The applicant or any person interested in an application may appear and be heard at a board meeting in person by agent or attorney. The extent of participation by any party at a meeting shall be at the control of the chair. So anyone that has interest may speak, but please, if your point has been made by someone prior, just let us know that rather than stating it again, and please try to stay germane to this board's purview. And please remember that only the board should interrupt a speaker. Anyone who does interrupt someone will be asked to leave. Section 3, documentation. Relevant documents, photographs, maps, plans, drawings, and the like items will be received into the record without authentication in the form of legible copies. Relevant comments, which are not cumulative or hearsay, will be received. Documents and comments may be placed in the record with an objection noted by a member of the board. Given the visual nature of the issues before this board and this language, I interpret this as allowing anyone speaking to present documentation as described here, but please, nothing obscene or simply derogatory toward any individual. Section 4, conduct of hearing. The normal order of hearing, subject to modification by the chair, shall be a statement of the matter to be heard. The chairperson or secretary, Lindsay Crockett, does this for us. Presentations by applicant and those speaking in favor of the applicant, a 5-minute limit per speaker. Presentations by oppositions, 5-minute limit per speaker. I want to clarify that the term opposition, which can be considered either plural or singular, should be interpreted as allowing for plural. Other public comment, 5-minute limit per speaker. I've moved public comment here and given these speakers the same time limit as the other speakers, so if the applicant wishes to respond to the comments, they can. Rebuttal by applicant, 3-minute limit, but the chair should modify as appropriate to allow appropriate rebuttal to the comments. Discussion and deliberation among board members, then we vote. Members of the board may question participants at any point in the hearing. All time limits have some flexibility to ensure statements are fully understood. So if someone needs another minute or two to make themselves understood, then let's give it to them. So that is how I would like to run the meeting from now on. Are there any concerns from the board about this? Hearing none.
I do have a question. So I'm just looking, okay, the rebuttal. So I think you're trying to give equal time. Would the rebuttal allow for as much time as given to the opposition? Like the final rebuttal, or is that limited to 3? So there's a 5-minute presentation, let's say there's 10 speakers at 5 minutes apiece, and then there's a 3-minute rebuttal?
Yeah. Yes, but I think it should be adjusted so that, it's like, say if there was a lot to respond to, give them the time to respond to it. Of course, then we debate with them for a while, so there's plenty of time in that to make their case as well.
Okay. I mean, the spirit of it, you're saying, is that they'll have a chance to make, respond to the opposition.
Yeah, fair time to be able to make their points.
I just have a more, rules question. So the adjustments that are being made here, some of them, I guess, extend out of conduct of hearing. There was other sections that were presented, I guess this would be technically an amendment to our rules and procedures. Could I get clarification on that from someone?
Sure. Well, the chair does have the ability to modify the rules if there are any substantive changes to the rules for one particular meeting. I would say the best course of action to make sure that, all decisions by the board are completely, held up in terms of a legal appeal. I would say make sure to do a motion to suspend the rules and then add whatever requirements you want to add, whatever changes you want to make, as Josh just did into the record, have a second and a vote on that. And it would need to be a 2/3 because it's an amendment to the rules.
I guess to me, we're adjusting quite a bit of the conduct of the hearing in other sections. So I don't know. I would be curious to hear from other board members potentially about thoughts on that. But I just feel like as a board, we should be maybe discussed more. I'm not sure.
Well, for section 2, there's no adjustment. For section 3, I'm just saying, since we're allowed to put in documentation and we're allowing people to speak, that those people can put in documentation. And then in section 4, all I'm really doing is moving public comments when appropriate up to underneath presentation by opposition. I'm just adding clarification.
So as far as like an overall time limit though, how are we ensuring that we're not becoming repetitive in public comment?
I think that's up to the people speaking. I don't think the board can control or know what people are going to say. I think the crowd or the the people who want to speak, if they've heard someone say what they wanted to say, then they can say, thank you, my point has been made by so-and-so.
Yeah, I don't know.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Is this for this meeting only, or are you proposing these changes moving forward as a total restructure?
I don't think it's a total restructuring.
Or not a total restructure? Are you proposing this moving forward?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
I know. I think we should adopt this because Section 4 is, we have never really used this at all. And we need to adopt this if we're going to say we're in compliance.
I would argue that we've rarely done the time limits, but we have followed the presentation, any comment, which is rarely, and then rebuttal if needed, and then discussion and vote. So we have not really adhered to any time limits in the past. That's what I would say, but I'm okay. I would be in favor of doing this for this meeting, knowing that there's a lot of discussion and a lot of people to be heard just based on the input I've received already. So I don't feel comfortable making a decision right now about a proposed change of the operation, but I'd be open to it for this meeting.
And I think that on the planning staff's end, we would want to incorporate updates to our administrative rules and procedures, which this has definitely called out that we need to make. We would want to do that on a holistic level and put all of those in front of you guys for discussion and vote.
Yes, I agree with that.
So I guess a question is there a motion that needs to be made to adopt that for this specific meeting, or?
I think that would provide the most clarity.
Okay, so then I would make a motion that we would follow the structure as presented here in front of us for this meeting on May 15th.
Second.
Okay, thank you for that. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And that allows us to move into our certificates of appropriateness, administrative approvals. Please let us know about those, Lindsay.
Okay, so the level 1 COAs issued since the last meeting. This was at 401 South Gay Street, the Lerner Lofts building. The applicant is replacing in kind the existing rooftop decking, railing, and screen walls, including the roofing material, Trex decking material. The visibility from the street's not increased. All of the work includes in kind replacement. The railings and these screen walls are not going to increase in height. At 106 South Gay Street, they'll install a new non-illuminated projecting sign, which is an aluminum sign with vinyl graphics. It's 20 inches by 20 inches. And then at 1715 Washington Avenue, this is in the infill housing overlay, the applicants are reconstructing this corner porch in kind with the footprint, roof line, and design elements to reflect the existing. And you can see the existing conditions here on the photograph, and all of those design elements will match the original. And that's it.
Now, is this part of the group that you said?
Yes,
There'd be
and
three
I
or
can
four
describe
together?
that. Yes.
Should we do them all at once?
Yeah, so
And then, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll describe. We have, this is a similar situation that happens often in the infill housing overlay where we have 4 new houses that are identical. So I will run through the description of work and the staff findings and recommendation. And then the projects will need 4 votes. So I've laid those out for you guys to make it easy, but just for time's sake, we can discuss them all at once since they are the same. Okay, so this is 5B 24IH, 5C, 5D, and 5E 24IH. They are new primary structures fronting Gap Road. You can see the site plans here on the screen. The only variation in the 4 site plans is their front setbacks. So the first one is proposed to be set 47 feet We've got 41 feet from the front property line, 33 and 25 feet. The house features a front gable roof, an exterior of board and batten siding, and a slab foundation. There's a 4-foot 5-inch entry stoop that's recessed below the primary roof line, and there's parking that's proposed as a 20-foot wide concrete driveway in front of the house. I'll run through some of the findings. So the houses are proposed to be set at varying front setbacks from the property lines. They go from 47 feet to 25 feet. The block to receive new construction is relatively undeveloped, but the existing houses are set between 15 and 18 from the front property line. The front setbacks should be revised to align with each other as much as possible. The applicant is proposing a concrete driveway in the front of the house. The infill guidelines recommend that on streets without alleys, those parking areas are at least 20 feet behind the front facade of the house. So the parking should be revised to meet the guidelines, and the final site plan should meet engineering standards. Overall, the facade is similar in scale and width to the context. The house is proposed to be for a concrete slab foundation. The foundation should be elevated at least 12 inches to be compatible with the context. Moreover, the topography of the site may affect the house's foundation. These are across the street from the relatively tall foundations on Gap Road we've reviewed recently. So the applicant should submit a revised foundation drawing to staff for approval. The application includes a 4-foot 5-inch entry stoop. That should be revised to include a front porch proportional to the block, measuring 8 feet deep. The guidelines recommend that windows and door styles be similar with similar proportion and ratio of solid to void to houses on the block and in the neighborhood. Additional windows are needed on the right and left side elevations to avoid those large swaths of siding with no transparency. The application also does not include information on siding materials, but we see the board and batten called out there. The guidelines recommend that clapboard-like siding be used in new houses and discourages vertical siding. So you can see the first motion on here that staff's recommends approval of 5B 24IH, subject to the conditions that the applicant revise the front setback to align with the adjacent new construction, revisions to the parking placement to meet the infill housing guidelines, the foundation to be elevated to reflect houses in the neighborhood with a profile submitted to staff, revisions to the front porch design, one window added to each to the right and left elevations, a lap siding instead of board and batten. And then the last one I didn't note is that all 4 of these are identical. So typically we recommend some differentiation in design to differentiate them from the others. And that could be approved by staff. And so that's the recommendation for 5B. And then I've got them all up here.
And to clarify, they're all the same design?
Yes.
And they all have the same setbacks and everything?
So the only difference is that setback. As I discussed, they're varying. So that's 47. We've got 41, 33, and 25. Those are the only differences. This plan was submitted for all 4.
Okay, great. Thank you. Is the applicant here, and would they like to speak? Doesn't sound like it. Is there any opposition to this? Or anyone that wants to speak from the public? No, so I will open it up for board discussion.
Lindsay, was there any topography information submitted with this?
You can see some lines drawn on the site plans here, at least for 3 of the houses, and then 3436 doesn't have any included, but that is in the middle of that block, so minimal.
It's always kind of a red flag when everything's drawn perfectly flat. So I'm wondering if the porch arrangement is appropriate for these sites.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that. Like I looked at the the grade of it as well, and imagining they'll be developing stair sets and handrails and guardrails and that sort of thing as they chase the grade. I know that we've gotten the final staff comments that a foundation profile needs to be resubmitted, but we may need to add something about articulation of the porch when they revise that as well.
Now, does that go downhill from the front to the back? That's what it appears there, so that their front porch is going to be in the ground and the back's going to be 8 to 10 feet in the air. So that's it's not really reflected in the elevations, makes it a little hard to judge, but my comment on these is always, can they mirror image 1 or 2 of them, to help differentiate them, where you flip flip them one side or the other. They're going to have to change their side setbacks to bring that driveway past the house in order to meet the guidelines as well. They could flip the houses alternately and even pair the driveways to try to get more yard and less pavement. There just seem a number of opportunities to make this a little neater. And I understand staff's recommendation is to pull all of their setbacks to a similar distance, not to where they gradually drift further away from the street. Is that correct? All right. Well, I do support the uniform street wall that you traditionally have in these neighborhoods. So I think that's a good one too.
How do we signal we want to speak? On the microphone or on these other buttons?
It's on the microphone.
Okay.
You can see your red at the top there.
Great. I'd make a motion to postpone. We're pretty concerned as a board about the varying elevations. They've shown all one thing. They're not here. A lot of times we have a dialogue about that. They're not here. There's too many staff comments to really work around this, so I make a motion to postpone.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to postpone and a second. Is there any more discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion passes.
I believe we'll need to have a similar motion for the next three, or you could make a motion and address all three of those case file numbers.
If okay, I'd like to amend my motion to include all case numbers of, let's see, 5-B-24-IH, 5-C-24-IH, 5-D-24-IH, 5-E-24-IH. Motion to postpone.
And for clarity, is this a 30-day postponement?
I saw that in our guidelines that we're supposed to set a time limit, and I don't know how important that is. I mean, I would like it a minimum of 30 days. Can I say that?
I think if we say a minimum of 30 days, it'll appear on next month's agenda, and we can figure out what to do at that point.
Yep. Okay.
Can we add to John's motion a recommendation that they have to, a condition that they have a big chunk in their application that says contractor to determine material this, material this, material that. Just actually tell us what you're building with the application. So the condition would be applicant to include specifications from exterior materials with their submittal.
I don't know that that necessarily needs to be included in the motion. Certainly Lindsay can post that, pass that along and let them know that that was something that was incredibly important to the board to make sure that they have ready to go for the next meeting.
Okay. Well, with that, then I second John's motion.
Okay, again, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Let's see. Okay, next. We have 0 West Hill Avenue, 4D24DT. And since I'm a close neighbor, I will recuse myself from this one.
And I'll recuse myself also.
Thank you. Okay, as Josh said, we're looking at 0 West Hill Avenue, case number 4D24DT.
Okay. So I'll give a brief introduction, but similar to last time, I'm going to leave the project description and all that to the applicants. And so this is a proposed residential construction, 10 to 13 stories of residential apartments, above 5 stories of structured parking on the rear massing. This building is proposed for an L-shaped site at the intersections of West Hill Avenue, Locust Street, and Front Avenue, and it's located immediately north of Neeland Drive and the river. The site is significantly sloped towards the south and towards the river. The building itself is L-shaped with a 6-story massing fronting West Hill Avenue and extending south along Locust Street and the larger massing fronting Front Avenue. The primary access point to the garage extends from West Hill. It's a 2-way drive accessing the parking garage, along with rideshare spots, short-term spaces. A secondary access point is located to the west and southwest of the garage, which will extend north off of Front Avenue and turn right into the parking garage. I'm going to run through some of these design elements in the discussion, but the 6-story massing fronting Hill Avenue is clad in brick veneer with vertical metal accents. The building extends south along Locust Street with a central section clad in vertical ribbed pre-finished metal panels. And then the south massing fronting the river features a cast-in-place concrete garage with a diagonal concrete bracing. The residential section is now proposed to be clad in hard coat stucco and features single light storefront windows, aluminum and glass balconies on all elevations. So the right-east proportion of the south massing closer to Locust Street has been revised to incorporate additional stories in height. And I'll run through some of the findings. I'm not going to go through all the comments I went through last month, but I will highlight some revisions since the last month and then the major points that relate to the staff recommendation. So to go back to the site in general, the block on Hill Avenue has a mix of significant historic houses, historic multifamily structures, and a contemporary multifamily building. The site's on the edge of downtown, fronting Neyland and the riverfront, with Maplehurst to the west and the City County building to the east. The context is varied in time period, detail, and scale. This new building will be larger in scale and massing than the immediately surrounding buildings. The application includes a 5-story structured parking garage with access off Front and Hill Avenue. The revised application does include a secondary access point off Front Street that will access this level of the parking. In terms of massing and scale, as a reminder, the guidelines generally encourage maintaining a pedestrian-scaled environment from block to block and dividing buildings into modules similar in scale to traditional downtown buildings. The south section is not pedestrian-scaled. It's divided into 2 large massings of a parking garage and a residential building, and both of those massings are relatively large in scale. The building heights have been revised since the April elevation, with the additional height located on the right side of the south massing fronting the river, so the board should discuss the scale of this massing in relation to the context of the area. The applicant has provided revised drawings in response to staff comments showing step backs on all street-facing elevations. That is shown on your screen here, and that's been updated on the website. That's in relation to comments submitted by City Plans Review and Inspections, and I'll let them clarify that if need be. At the May meeting, the Design Review Board discussed potential additional pedestrian engagement on the building's south elevation. That's this level fronting Front Avenue. And also the design standards in the zoning code require a minimum transparency of 30% there on ground floor front facades. So to meet the transparency standards, the application proposes an additional open level of parking along Front Avenue, which does not further engage the pedestrian experience along Front. The application does include additional streetscape landscaping detail as well. We can see that. So the board should also discuss the proposed ground level design within the neighborhood context. In terms of materials, the guidelines recommend materials that relate to the scale, durability, color, and texture of materials in the area. Overall, this proposed hard coat stucco is compatible with the context, along with the brick veneer. The different siding breaks up those massings along Locust Street and Hill Avenue. The garage has been revised to include 5-story tall diagonal supports. These do kind of contribute to that visual prominence of the parking garage, and the ground level is supported by cast-in-place concrete columns, which are open to the exterior. So in general, some of the recommendations, the board should discuss the overall scale of the proposed building, specifically the south massing fronting the river in relation to the context. They should also discuss the pedestrian level design within the context. Pending board decision or any additional conditions related to scale and ground level design, approval should be subject to the following conditions. The final site plan and parking garage meet city engineering standards. The final landscaping plan meet standards of the city zoning code and the guidelines. Any mechanical equipment or service utilities not shown be placed on secondary elevations and screened as necessary, and the signage should return to the board as a separate application.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is the applicant present?
Present.
Please give us your name and address.
Taylor Forrester, 1111 North Shore Drive, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37919. Here on behalf and along with the applicant, Brock Hudgens Architects. My involvement became after the April meeting. I've gone back, I've reviewed the video multiple times from the April meeting. There was a ton of discussion, obviously from the applicant, from neighborhood comments of concerns, and then several comments by the board following a lengthy discussion geared towards certain design elements with the project. Those comments from the DRB board, the parking garage treatment at the street level on front of avenues should be more pedestrian friendly. The response in the revised plans show that the parking garage has been shifted towards Front Avenue to address the fenestration and transparency requirements while also providing opportunity for future retail storefronts when economically viable. There was also comments and discussions around softening the visual impact of the parking garage. The parking garage design has been refined to address these comments by the DRB and the neighborhood comments to incorporate the neighborhood feedback by providing, to incorporate neighborhood feedback that we received from our meeting with the neighborhood following that DRB meeting in April. The visual impact of the parking garage has been reduced by 1 floor by lowering the parking garage to the front avenue elevation. The parking garage modification also addresses the fenestration and blank wall requirements, while also adding a secondary point of vehicular access into the development. The street level experience along Front Avenue is also improved by this change, as noted above. Additional comment was to provide information and details for the Front Avenue streetscape and building interface. An additional point of vehicular access to the parking garage was incorporated at Front Avenue. The front parking garage was lowered to Front Avenue to reduce the height of the blank retaining wall to provide opportunity for future retail. There was also a comment and discussion around landscape plans. Those have been supplemented into the revised plans as well. Received a few comments from city staff, plans review and inspections, dealing with step backs, as Lindsay had mentioned earlier. Those have been incorporated into the revised plans along the street side. Also a requirement on Front Avenue that for street frontage for the to meet the blank wall and fenestration design requirements. The building design has been refined to meet the blank wall and fenestration requirements. Along Front Avenue and Locust Street, the Hill Avenue facade already complies with this requirement. The revised elevation sheets reflecting these refinements have been submitted. The transparency calculations have been updated. Those have been incorporated into the revised plans as well. We met with the neighborhood, addressed concerns, and incorporated certain revisions into the revised plans. In the interest of time, I'm
Thank you. Lindsay, will you pull up the presentation, please? My name is Ben Hudgens with Brock Hudgens Architects. Address is 530 Mean Street. That's Atlanta, Georgia, 30318. Just want to walk you through the changes that Taylor just outlined. Next slide. So as mentioned, the step backs actually provide great improvement to the project. They reduce the building footprint overall. We'll talk through the impact of the massing in just a minute, but next slide. One of the biggest moves was pushing the entire building down 1 floor so that it actually engages and activates Front Avenue, which you can see here. Parking now circulates all the way down to Front, so 2 points of vehicular access, one from Hill and one from Front, per the request of the neighborhood, as well as concerns from the DRB. Next slide. Again, the building footprint in general reduces with the step backs. Next slide. Landscape plan provided per the DRB's request. Next. Concept for material palette for landscape and site furnishings. Next. So the Hill Avenue facade here, which you see along with the context on Hill, you'll notice that the step back provides an opportunity to introduce a patio, outdoor patio area just there at the corner. Again, we think this is a huge improvement for the project and for the neighborhood. The building step back also emphasizes the parking base as being a different mass of the building, which again helps bring down the scale. Next slide. Down along front, the parking garage facade redesign referential to the rainbow arch bridge treatment, right? So we're expressing the structure of the garage with this diagrid approach. But again, by pushing the garage down to front, we're able to meet the fenestration requirements, the transparency requirements, but also provide the opportunity with the taller first floor and the concrete construction to have future retail opportunity. Next slide, which you can see here. You can imagine these bays, which are typical retail storefront, could be infilled with a retail use when viable. So one of the big concerns that we heard from the DRB last month was we were neglecting the pedestrian experience along front. So the plan here is push the garage down, engage it, provide opportunity for future retail. From the Henley Street Bridge, again, the entire building, just to be clear, the entire building, including the garage, pushed down an entire floor. Again, that was to provide circulation and vehicular access to front. So everything moved down a floor. The left portion of the building stayed at that lower elevation. The right portion that pops up along Locust is where we've regained the square footage that was lost by introducing the step backs. We think that this is actually a benefit to the design. Makes the project more interesting. It's also consistent with some of the feedback that we heard from the community with pushing more of the massing along Locust Street specifically. So again, pushing the mass there away from the bridge. Next slide. So again, diagrammatically, this is where we started with the original DRB workshop. Next. Last month, the design presented was 6 stories lower on Hill Avenue. Next. And from then, from that meeting, again, introducing the step backs, increasing the height along the Locust frontage. Next. You can see here an overlay. The green is where we're at. The gray is where we started. Next slide. Revisiting the scale discussion and the skyline diagram that was provided. You'll see the building within the context here. Next slide. And finally, the building within the overall greater skyline context. So we thank you for your time and your feedback. We think that these are improvements to the design and to the project, and we're excited to get your feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Zach Bearden present? Thank you. Patrick Casson?
Good afternoon. I'm Patrick Casson with Woodfield Development. I just want to come up and thank everyone for your time. And the result of the zoning feedback, DRB feedback, and neighborhood feedback has resulted in what we believe to be a materially enhanced project overall. So we believe that the process has resulted in that improvement. So I wanted to thank you for that and encouraging us to go through that process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I think there was some confusion. I think there was, I guess Ben thought we were only going to get 5 minutes, so there was kind of a panic and a shift. And so I just wanted to kind of conclude. In applying the applicable guidelines identified by staff, we submit that the development plans satisfy the intent of the downtown design guidelines. As you're aware, the downtown design guidelines are not intended to bring uniformity in design or approach. The guidelines are applied in a flexible manner to meet the needs of development, and these are not a rigid set of rules. We believe that this revised plan is a better plan. The process has worked with the previous meeting where we had the discussion and received the comments, met with the opposition on May 1st, have incorporated certain changes based on these comments, and considering that it meets the guidelines, we'd ask that you approve and issue the certificate of appropriateness. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else speaking in favor of the project tonight? Okay, thank you. Then we will move on to opposition. And the first person listed here is Greg McMillan. Please give us your name and address.
Yes, my name is Greg McMillan. My address is 400 Main Avenue. I am a downtown resident, but that's the address that I use for security purposes. Thank you. Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to address the Design Review Board concerning the project under consideration. This first slide just simply restates the portions of the DRB guidelines that would appear to be most applicable when evaluating this project. I certainly do not claim as much familiarity or understanding of these guidelines that the members of the board have. My knowledge is limited to the workshop and the April 17th DRB meeting where this project was presented and postponed, giving the applicant a second opportunity to address the concerns and issue raised. The discussion on the second slide are comments that this board had for the applicant at the April 17th meeting, and to some degree, some of those may have been addressed today, and I will profess that my understanding of these guidelines may not equal theirs, but they do not, as I understand it, have addressed some of the issues that needed to be done. We wanted more in their submission to show the human aspect. Today, we saw a single rendering of Front Avenue of how we may interact with this project and the way it would look, but none of the other drawings show how the Locust Street sidewalk and or the Hill Avenue really interact with pedestrians and that opportunity. There's no indication about lighting, entrances, and some of those things. On my slides, 5, 6, and 7, and they're not in color here, yes they are, you'll see small red rectangles that I placed that were to represent humans because I didn't have any drawings in what they gave to the board until today when they showed us just recently any human interaction. It was my attempt to try and find something about the scale of this project. I'm not certain that the setbacks that they are now claiming, as shown on this slide, and on the west side, it doesn't show it at all, but now they're claiming there is one on facing Henley, are actually setbacks as defined by the guidelines. What it is they've expanded the parking lot to go to the property line on Locust and left the building exactly where it was. It doesn't have a setback in the residential portion as required. It doesn't have an obvious base, middle, and top, as the guidelines would indicate would be appropriate and necessary. As of the May 1st, 2004 block meeting, next slide please, they showed the placement of the building as indicated on the bottom left picture. That's still nearly the picture that they show now. If you move that building to where the red line on the top right picture is, 5 or 6 feet off of Front Avenue, they're going to block the entire northernmost pier and 2 or 3 sections of the first arch of Henley Street, which is a visual draw for downtown as you approach on Nealon and is part of the waterfront. Their building is simply going to block that. It is not preserving a view of a historic and beautiful structure. The 5th, 6th, and 7th slides all have comments at the bottom of red where they don't have all of the detail that you indicated you would like to know about the way flow happens, the details and those sorts of things. I will note that some of the landscaping and so forth still don't appear to comply with what would be appropriate for the zone and within the requirements of the city. I considered not addressing the size and massing of the project because that concern's been talked about, but it is apparent that the applicant has made it clear through the past year they are not willing to alter the size and massing to comply with the DRB guidelines. They have argued at past meetings it's consistent with adjacent buildings, relying on Nealon Stadium, approximately 1 mile away, the awful city-county building in the brutalist style, and an office building 3 blocks away. None of those buildings serve the purpose of this building, and only one can be fairly said to be adjacent. All these buildings were likely considered in the development and implementation of the guidelines. Imagine this project in other areas of the grid district. Would it be approved for the 200 block of Gay Street, the site of the Pryor Brown Garage? What about the mostly vacant corner across Gay Street where the flower pot used to be? If First Baptist or the Bank of America buildings were unimproved property, would you say these plans with a 5-story parking garage visible to a major street were permissible for those sites? While the proposed site is vacant and not particularly attractive, please do not overlook the guidelines. While there is at last a proposal for that site's use, the guidelines are to prevent the occurrence of another city-county building and to provide for responsible and appropriate development. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next on the list is Dina Markakis.
Hello all, thank you for giving me the time to address the board. I really appreciate it. My name is Dean Markakis and I live at 608 West Hill Avenue. I would like to add some historical context to suggest that this design also would not be supported by historical Knoxville planners. In the early 20th century, there was a movement to beautify cities and move away from their industrial past. This movement culminated in a 1930 comprehensive city plan for Knoxville by Bartholomew and Associates 1 year prior to the completion of the Henley Street Bridge. I'd like to read you a quote from this document, if I could. The city is spending about $1 million in the construction of the Henley Street Bridge, and unless its approaches, particularly on the south side, are protected, the inevitable cluster of filling stations, stores, and garages will destroy the effectiveness and beauty of the bridge. The destructive influence of such invasion cannot be reckoned in dollars and cents, but it is safe to say that the cost of the land needed to prevent it will be far smaller than the damage resulting from failure to protect the bridge approach. These planners in the 1930s demonstrate apprehension regarding structures and garages detracting from Knoxville's beauty and new bridge investment. A multi-level street and bridge-facing garage as proposed by this development is something these planners could never have imagined. I'd like to move forward to the 1987 Downtown Knoxville Plan, thank you, developed by the Downtown Task Force. It says a new image of downtown Knoxville should be created, featuring landscaped entry portals, attractive pedestrian linkages, and new parks and plaza. As an example, Henley Street, now a barrier between business core and the fair site, can be rebuilt as a landscape boulevard, a new foyer for downtown, featuring wide tree-lane medians and pedestrian crosswalks. It goes on to say in the next slide that a place by the river, the Tennessee River, is a fabulous resource upon which we've turned our backs. Physical improvements and access to the river are high priorities. It goes on in the next slide to talk about the portal again. Henley Street entry. As one approaches downtown from the south via Henley Street Bridge, the city appears to sit on a green hillside. This vista should be preserved as part of any development which occurs adjacent to the Henley Street Bridge. Views out of downtown toward the river will be improved by the same techniques that strengthen the city on a hill image. If you could go to the next slide, it shows the beautification plan, and it shows those views very clearly on Henley Street Bridge that are so important to Knoxville and to how it's viewed. It goes on to talk about urban form. It says the scale, height, and bulk of buildings and their relationship to open spaces which surround them are critical elements in the physical image of downtown, especially when viewed from a distance. The guidelines illustrated on map 13 consist of identifying the general height and mass desired for potential development sites and important views and vistas which are related to the built environment. In the next slide, it talks about that map 13. If you could go back one. That map 13, and it shows what would be appropriate for that area in order to keep those vistas and the green city on a hill image. It says low building height and bulk. It goes on to describe Maplehurst, which in this document refers to both east and west of Henley. It says this largely vacant tracts on the east and west of Henley Street Bridge and adjacent areas should be targeted for new residential development. The design should take advantage of the river overlook location while respecting the scale, architecture, and views of existing adjacent buildings. It talks about the site and architectural design should enhance the important portal entry to downtown. It says any new development should seek to extend the presence of existing neighborhood, not be a barrier between it and the core. It goes on to talk about design recommendations. It talks about size and bulk. Structures could be low mid-rise at Hill Avenue and low rise down the slope. It talks about historic compatibility. Should blend with historic buildings and materials in bulk and setback, although need not be a particular historic style. Any development should work around historically significant buildings, in this case, River House, and of course, the Henley Street Bridge. Neighborhood character should retain the character of established neighborhood by carefully landscaping and saving mature trees. Where possible, this site combines unique surroundings with a convenient, accessible location. It goes on to talk about design guidelines more. A lot of them are the design guidelines that you already have, but I'll say a few of them. encourage new construction to respect the positive attributes of the design of adjacent buildings, recognize and enhance historically significant architecture that remains in downtown, enhance the vistas into and out of downtown, avoid negative microclimatic conditions, including excessive shading of buildings, streets, or pedestrian areas. In summary, the current proposed plan is not in the spirit of the current design review board guidelines, nor historical spirit spanning back all the way to 1930. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Next up on the list is Kathleen Goldsby.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to address the board on behalf of concerned citizens throughout Knoxville. If you want to go to the next slide.
Can I ask you to bend the microphone a little bit closer, please? Sorry. And give us your name and address.
Kathleen Goldsby and 608 West Hill Avenue. The proposed development has generated more public response than any project brought before the board in memory. The overwhelming majority of the sentiments have been negative toward the design, intensely negative. On the screen, you'll see a small but representative sample of these sentiments as collected from a number of public sources. For those viewing the session online, allow me to summarize: monstrosity, ugly, depressing, massive concrete wall, very bad precedent. You get the idea. Not conforming with the guidelines or fitting of the downtown riverfront and the city's aspirations for it. If you want to advance to the next slide. Here we'll see the opening quote from an op-ed piece written by former Mayor Victor Ashe, expressing his opposition to the design and the development in total. His statement reads, "The proposed 16-story high-rise at Hill and Locust in downtown Knoxville facing the Tennessee River has to be one of the ugliest proposals for our waterfront than one can imagine." He goes on to state that the proposal flies in the face of the city's decades-long effort to reclaim the riverfront and put it to appealing and useful civic purposes. The proposed tower represents a wall, effectively dividing the south and north sides of the river. A soaring garage capped off with 10 or 11 or more levels of housing is what people will see entering our city from the south. Welcome to Knoxville? Not so much. In addition to dividing the north and south sides of the river, note that the design provides no connectivity between east and west sides of Henley Street. Rather, the scale of this project would paralyze traffic in this portion of the city. Did anyone see the traffic jams from last week's country music concerts? Stay tuned for graduation gridlock later this week. It's going to be a constant car sewer on Neeland if you allow it. Next slide. So also, the strong opposition to this design and proposed development are found in the more than 1,300 petition signatures collected by Keep Knoxville Charming. This number of signatures was gathered in just over 1 month. And also note the zip codes from which the signers originate. You'll see zip codes from throughout the city, with the South Side residents representing the largest single block. Finally, the developers have committed to nothing in the way of community amenities. No commitment to retail other than to leave space for future investments. A coffee shop? I don't think so. Further, there are no teeth to assure that any commitments verbally said will be honored. This is as good as it's going to get. They're going to verbally tell you that it'll be full of amenities and trees and green space and walking areas, but these are nowhere in the designs before you, and this design is what you're asked to review. I don't think you should approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Josh, you're listed on here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't like having to come up here. My name is Josh Wright, 608 West Hill Avenue. You all know I love density and downtown development, especially residential, but as this board's urban design representative, I feel compelled. The design guidelines are aspirational. The guidelines are not about what Knoxville is now. They are about what Knoxville can be and making sure no new building stops that progress. The painting by Chris McAdoo of Market Square under construction in 2003, to me, captures the rebuilding of downtown. When I first moved here in 95, almost nobody went downtown. At 5, it was emptied out. Market Square was full of derelict buildings, and you couldn't not swim in the river without getting sick. The river used to literally be a sewer. The city's poor designed stormwater system would spill raw sewage into the river. The city had turned its back on the river and put it in a highway, a jail, and parking garages along it. Knoxville had treated Nayland Drive like a car sewer, a bypass to a dead downtown. But our community saw how beautiful it could be and spent hundreds of millions of dollars improving downtown, fixing the sewer system, cleaning up the river, and building parks, greenways, and sidewalks along the river in Nayland Drive. Now those are used. People recreate on the river with paddleboards and kayaks. Thousands of people daily use the sidewalks and bike lanes along Nayland Drive to commute as well as exercise and relax. On a spring day, Nayland Drive looks like Gay Street on a first Friday, and the restaurants along the river are packed with people. Next slide. Does anyone here believe that in 100 or even 25 years, the parking lots and parcels along downtown and the river will remain underdeveloped? By seeing what could be, we have transformed downtown into a rich, exciting place for our entire greater metropolitan area. That is why the land for this application is in the Boulevard District, so this transformation can continue. Next slide. Our design guidelines were created to implement the 2005 improvement strategy. Within that document, there is a map laying out how Nayland could be modified to connect the city to the river. Next slide. Plans within plans within plans, multiple master plans over 100 years old have been developed and implemented to improve the lives of Knoxville's community. These master plans are all aspirational and ambitious. They all point to this: connect the city to the river, repair the mistakes of urban removal. Next slide. The city-county building, the Food City, Thompson Bowling Arena, any street-level garage, and Nayland Drive itself are not precedent. They are anti-precedent. They could not and should not be designed this way again. They are the urban design mistakes the city made when it indulged in urban removal. This board was put in place to keep those kinds of mistakes from being made again. Next slide. Along the river, there are two successful restaurants, 3 museums, 2 river boats, an historical excursion train, and a myriad of recreational offerings. They are cut off from downtown Knoxville by Nayland, but the historically envisioned renovation of Nayland will change this bypass into a boulevard, tying all of these disparate elements together, creating a cohesive connection to our downtown, the Tennessee River, UT, the Greenways, and all the way into the new urban wilderness. Next slide. This is Nayland today. Look how much incredible opportunity is hiding under all of that concrete and asphalt, if only allowed to continue to flourish as we have the South Waterfront and the urban wilderness. Next slide. Yes, to turn Nayland from a 4-lane interstate bypass into a 4-lane pedestrian and bike-friendly boulevard is aspirational, but this scruffy little city has been making big things happen, like stopping TDOT from paving over our urban wilderness for at least since 1982. The problem is that rather than seeing what can be, the project before you does not take into account our city's aspirations. It was our community's planning and investment of our tax dollars that made the location of this project desirable enough to build on. But instead of understanding that history, the project before you makes the same mistakes of the past by placing a full block, 6-story street level garage in our Nayland Drive Boulevard district. This design turns its back on the future of Nayland Drive and the Tennessee River and even the historic Henley Street Bridge, and again treats them like a sewer. The applicant's business, design choices, and creative problem-solving skills are their own responsibility. This building does not adhere to or even honor the intent of the Design Review Board guidelines. If allowed to be built as designed, it will set a precedent that cannot be undone. You know me. I hate to slow down applications. I always trying to find a path forward for developers because I know how hard that work is. But this project, after coming before the board multiple times, should not be approved until they take the time to properly understand what is required of them and design the project accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill?
Thank you. I'm Bill Lyons, 608 West Hill Avenue. I want to take a little bit of a different approach to what as I spoke to you last time. I do want to stress there are a number of guidelines, as I mentioned in the earlier meeting, that I do believe the building falls far short of. Among the most obvious of these to me is the one that says building mass and scale shall complement those of adjacent building. Now, mass, scale, I think, have pretty common understanding, and adjacent has a specific understanding, and that does not include Nayland Stadium, the city-county building, or the towers on Henley Street. But what I want to do is back up just a minute. the basis upon we're looking is this massive structure that has basically implied by the nature of the site, as Lindsay stated earlier. But that site is a choice. The owners of the property decided to bundle these lots and sell them together. But these are discrete lots. They did not have to do that. The developer bought a number of discrete lots. There's nothing that prevented buildings from being constructed individually on those lots or on segments of those lots, specifically the lot on Hill Avenue as on the top, which is actually in the grid district as opposed to the other lots which are in the Boulevard district. So to me, the clear possibility has always been build a structure, a substantial structure on the corner of Hill and Locust in that vacant lot. And it can be higher than what the developers have proposed. I don't think anybody objects to that. I certainly don't. And then deal with the other lots independently and have those complement the incredible and add to the incredible investment that the city of Knoxville has made in the waterfront. I mean, it turns out with the Boulevard District, we are stewards of the waterfront district. Mayor Ash, who's here today, tremendous investment in the North Waterfront, which is a tremendous asset to the city today. Mayor Haslam and then Mayor Rogero, tremendous investments in the South Waterfront. And you could look at the scale. Of course, there's a form-based code on the other side. The scale all along the Tennessee River on the south side is appropriate, as in representing a lot of public input and public process in the South Waterfront design procedures that we went through. So there's no reason to ignore the scale requirements. The builder, everybody is at risk here. The builders do large buildings. They came in and decided we'll put a large building on a combined number of lots. Nothing in the guidelines were in place when that happened. So what I would ask you to do is to refer this, table this motion, or reject this motion, and say there is plenty of opportunity to get appropriate scale to develop these lots, with the Hill Avenue being in the grid district with a lot more height if necessary, and with appropriate scale, especially in the development of the lower lots. And that would be something that would honor the tradition of the waterfront. It would honor the investment that the city has made, and it would prevent placing a structure which is so out of character for what that waterfront is, that there's no reason I think Mr. Farger said these guidelines have flexibility. Well, flexibility is one thing, but you'd have to stretch the meaning of flexibility very far to conclude that the guidelines that are in effect would be honored by an approval of what's been proposed. So this project is massively out of scale still. I appreciate that it's been lowered to floor, and we had spoken to the developers in our meeting and asked that there be more height along Locust. That is on the margins a slight improvement, but it's only improvement on the margins. So basically, that concludes what I have to say. I would just ask that we not be driven by business decisions that did not have to be made because of the interest of people assembling the land or the interest of people wanting to develop it. And those are perfectly rational on their behalf. I don't begrudge their doing that, but it doesn't mean that the guidelines have to be manipulated, ignored in order to accommodate those business decisions. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Did anybody sign up to speak that isn't on my list up here? Do we have another list anywhere? Okay, thank you. Is there any further public comment? Okay. Go ahead, or please go to the podium and give us your name and address.
Hello, I'm Nick Kazana, 5108 Buckhead Trail. Didn't plan to speak today, but I thought I'd better say something. First of all, I have no dog in this hunt. No financial personal architectural meaning at all. However, I have developed and been involved with 9 properties in downtown Knoxville, and today I still own 2 of them. And my last development was a Tennessean hotel, which was totally different than anything else that had been in Knoxville. It'd been very well received, and probably one of the more successful hotels in the city. In addition, I have at least 15 other buildings in West Knoxville, in the Knoxville area. And I actually finished one just last week, but the last 2 buildings have been different than the buildings that I did 10 years ago. And Knoxville has been very consistent in doing almost the same thing all the time. But we're having trouble competing with cities like Greenville, South Carolina, Huntsville, Alabama, and Lexington, Kentucky, and other cities. I'm concerned about blocking views of some of the people that are already there, absolutely. But I'm also concerned about Knoxville staying comfortable all the time and not moving out of its shell. This is a magnificent development. I didn't like the first rendition, I will tell you that, but I really like what these people have come to do. So I'm not taking sides one way or the other, but I'm real concerned about Knoxville and moving forward. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Okay, I don't see anybody else, so I'll give the applicant a chance to speak again, the 3-minute limit.
Thank you. Just want to address a couple of these things and provide some clarification. Step backs have been applied per the feedback we got from the zoning staff. It's tricky because, as mentioned, the property sits on 2 different districts, so we're trying to meet two different district guidelines, but we also have 65 feet of fall across the site. So that presented a challenge, but the step backs have been satisfied. Let's see, building massing, again, it has been reduced. I showed that in the diagrams. The majority of the footprint has been reduced by an entire floor. The garage was stated to be 6 stories, is actually 5 stories. Again, the whole garage pushed down to engage Front Avenue. We think that the new design does support future retail use, as we illustrated. It was mentioned that it's not really adequate, but the reality is it has the vertical clearance and the construction type that would easily accommodate future retail storefronts. Again, the last thing I'll say, the scale mentioned across the Tennessee River on the south side, the reality is those are all 4- and 5-story stick frame apartment projects, right? These are projects that are inferior in terms of construction quality and construction type. What we're trying to produce is something that will stand the test of time and be there a very long time. The last thing I'll say is, in terms of the building character, I think it's important to note that the building is a little more contemporary, but interestingly, the Henley Street Bridge, the original designer in the 30s was fired because the bridge was Gothic arches and 2 traditional. New engineer from Des Moines, Iowa was brought in to introduce their rainbow arch design, which was super progressive at the time, connected Knoxville, looking to the future. So again, we think that the design is timeless, but also forward-thinking. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I will now open up this discussion to the board.
Well, I'll kick off here with my comments. Like many folk have seen here, this does look like a step in the right direction. As we start to reduce the scale toward Henley Street, give a little more respect to that historic view in and reflect the church on the other side where you're low with a tower somewhat reflects that. I would like to see the Henley Street side get even lower and the tower get taller, somewhat like Mr. Kazada pointed out, we shouldn't be afraid to move forward. And Knoxville certainly has a dearth of tall buildings. So I think taking advantage of the lack of height restrictions and addressing the concerns of the adjacent buildings in terms of scale, looking at the historic views and gateway portal character of this site, I think it helps with that as well. I appreciate that they've dropped down to front and given the opportunity for future retail or storefront or even office on there. I went down and after further study of Front Street, it's a tremendous link from the east to west of Henley Street. The potential there to connect through Maplehurst over to the World's Fair Greenway and further to the stadium and sports district, I think has great potential in the future. And in the other direction, with a link across property owned by the church, which is undeveloped, Front Street comes in at the pedestrian bridge that crosses to Volunteer Landing, which could create a linkage engaged by this building from the university to the Calhoun's area and what future that may occur there with the redesign of Nayland Drive. I like the redesign of the parking garage, however, it still is a parking garage. The introduction of greenery incorporated into the design does soften that somewhat. But those are really my comments and personal feelings. So I am a South Knoxvillian of 8 generations and crossing this bridge daily. I would like to see more preservation of its treatment as a portal into downtown, and I would likewise encourage progressive work, and that's a challenge of this board, is to make things appropriate and in scale and compatible, and yet allow creativity and forward motion architecturally and in terms of planning and higher density. The trade-off on higher density is we help curb the sprawl that has scattered Knoxville all over the county. So I do not wish to be a hindrance to density, but I do agree this is a permanent addition to our town, and we really do need to consider all these things and try to get it the best we can. Thank you.
I'd like to follow up what Perry said. I agree that Knoxville needs to have progressive development as well. And I think with that, though, comes a massive weight and gravity and responsibility to do this right. Given the precedent that this project will set, we will be looking to it to direct and validate other projects in the future. I know that this is a developer-driven project. I mean, it's as tall as it is because it makes the numbers work, and that's less palatable when you're discussing aesthetics and the potency of design, which definitely still makes me want to see the massing and scale brought down. But again, that comment means bring it down to what? And what does that mean to the performa? What does it mean to that? So that's not the purview of this board. The purview of the board is to discuss the design guidelines and the appropriateness of the design for Knoxville. So I'm going to keep my thought process in, like, do I want to see, or do we want to see this project in Knoxville, Tennessee? So the scale and the proportion still seems unresolved to me as well. But really, the garage articulation or lack thereof is underwhelming, and I'd love to have seen a pass of trying to integrate some sort of the fenestration or anything from the top towers bleeding down or extending down maybe to the garage portion to start to take away that scale, bring it into somewhat envelop it with the tower above. I think there's a lot of opportunity for it. I think this is like an iteration of the project that's almost there, but it just isn't yet. And that's what's bothersome still.
I have a question for the board and maybe some clarification. What's this board's relationship to the design guidelines and then to zoning ordinances? Because I'm reading two different things. When I don't think they have to get a variance for this. Am I correct? Like it's ZKG or DKG, it's zoned.
And I'll defer to plans review and inspections to clarify, but as it's designed right now, there are no variances that are required to be issued by the design review board, and I can speak to that a little bit more, but by the design review board or the Board of Zoning Variances, what's in front of you guys right now meets the standards of the code.
Yeah, there's no height limit. You can build 0 to 25 feet setback. So anyway, that's what I was wondering. But then I clearly read the design guidelines, encourage building forms that are complementary to the mass of adjacent buildings. So that's what I'm wrestling with in this project.
Complementary, this is my interpretation, doesn't mean the same as.
Right.
So I think, for me, the elephant in the room is that this thing could be one giant tower that's just on one side of the site and still allow a lot of view to the existing buildings that are there. And probably should, in my opinion, because we have towers here. This isn't the first tower in downtown. It would be the first residential, really big tower. I guess maybe the Holston classifies, but then you get in my opinion, best of both worlds, that you get the height, you get something sleek and modern and beautiful, and you open up the site to more view, and you actually add a lot more value to the upper floors of the new building because you're getting better views and exposure. That's my personal opinion. I'm not sure that necessarily jives with the purview of the board, but I think that there are significant improvements that have been made in this iteration, and I think that they're appreciated. I don't think we're quite there yet, but it's definitely moving in the right direction, in my opinion.
I did have one other question that came up in the comments and was published was distributed in a comment sent to Lindsay. Here was the issue of the alignment with the arch, where the drawings provided by the applicants show the front edge of the parking garage as it hits front behind the first pier and first arch of the bridge, which I find acceptable because it maintains the view of the bridge from end to end. But then there have been some that have interpreted the site plan and placed the building about the second panel into the arch there. And I would really, if there were any future approval, I think part of it would be contingent on that this building does not block the first pier or any portion of the initial arch. And that would be good to get that resolved either by having the applicant get their surveyor out to place a corner, a batter board, or some corner marker that shows us physically on the site where that southwest corner would hit the ground over near the bridge.
Just a few more comments. I think that if this wasn't a multifamily project, I feel like it may have been a bit more palatable to see, even in the scale that it may be today. But it's things like having the back door of the building facing Nayland to the south with that's a pool amenity deck, if I'm not incorrect. That is almost level with Henley. That just seems like a misstep to me. Also, we've not talked about this much, but how the material patinas and ages over time is really important. It's a cementitious stucco, I'm assuming, and it's shown as white. I'm just imagining that building in 25, 50 years, what it's going to look like. which is something I bring up often with projects, is just how the materiality is going to age and patina. So that's another concern of the stucco's applicability to this project.
I have a few specific questions related to the parking garage, if you don't mind answering those. The first one related to traffic flow, and we have that new traffic access on Front Avenue. Can you talk about how that works? Is it two-way traffic, and would it allow for keeping cars off of Hill Avenue and direct access to Neeland?
So expectation is that it's two-way, both on Hill and on this exit to Front. Civil engineer has studied this in terms of limiting access on Hill. I'm not really sure that I'm the one to answer that.
To clarify my question, I'm trying to think of alternate routes for folks that live in the building. Would one option be for them to only use the Front Avenue, elect to use only the Front Avenue entry and exit, especially during times of really dense traffic?
Okay, so I'm going to try to repeat back the question, if that's okay. I want to make sure I'm answering it appropriately. So I think the question is, because both entrances are being proposed to be two ways. And the question is, would residents have the ability to exit out front at different times of the day? Of course, right? We wouldn't. I'm sorry, I'm struggling with the question. I apologize.
No, what I'm getting at is that in this area, especially during special events, Hill Avenue and Neeland are very congested.
Correct.
And so I'm wondering about the thought process with the second entry and exit, and if that would truly alleviate some of the strain in that area. And say I'm a resident there, I could just elect to not go on Hill at all and go home down Locust and into that entry and avoid the whole situation on Hill.
Correct. I apologize for being difficult.
That's okay. You're good. Okay, so I have some more questions related to that. In the future retail scenario, is that entry and exit preserved?
Yes. So the expectation is that front bay is what gets converted to retail along that entire frontage. So the draw valve remains.
Great. And then finally, in the retail area, future retail area, you mentioned that the floor-to-floor heights and the construction type are compatible with that use. Are there any other mechanical systems or electrical systems that would interfere with the use in that way in the future?
No, so the majority of the building systems are served over on that west side. Of course, if there were retailers in this space, or when there are retailers, they would have their own mechanical that would be within the storefront plenum zone. That would be accommodated. But really, the only thing that we'll have to deal with are rain leaders coming down through the garage that have to get routed down to storm. But no, I wouldn't expect anything else to impede that vertical clearance.
Great, thank you. I'll keep going if nobody else has anything. Okay. The next thing I wanted to talk about is I'm going to call it the rear, but it's really the interstitial space between the River House and this development, access to that area and what the nature of that area is between the existing and new.
Yeah, Lindsay, if you don't mind going, there's a landscape plan that has it in color. So that would be, again, that's 40 feet below from the Hill Street parcel. So our intention would be, and what we've done successfully in other projects, is to turn that into a dog run for residents to go down and let their dog out at off hours. We'll have a dog spa will be one of the amenities within the project. That's wash stations, et cetera. So.
And what's the plan for access to the rear side of the existing buildings?
For us to solve access to adjacent
We'll
properties?
just allow access to the adjacent
Of course.
properties.
We're very open to that discussion if that were to be brought up or brought to us. Said another way, I mean, we haven't been approached about that within the neighborhood meetings to date. That's not true. Let me take that back. That's not true because there was a resident of the River House who brought up how could they get back and access of the, and our response was we're happy to accommodate that. We would do that through an easement access agreement.
Thank you. And then one more thing related to the retail. If in the future retail goes in that parking garage area, is the space that is now dedicated to parking required to provide enough parking for the development? So can you afford to let that much parking go?
We can. We're materially overparked based on our market surveys to date, and so I think we're seeing less and less reliance on vehicles, especially in in-town locations, and so this would be no problem. I mean, our existing high-rise is 70% occupied and 55% leased on the parking, so we see that pretty common.
Question since you're up there. Your property line goes to Henley Street Bridge, is that right?
Correct.
And then you've held it off of Henley Street, the building itself,
Correct.
for
There's
the
a
entrance.
TDOT requirement.
Okay. Okay.
I guess I'll go. I just want to say that your drawings with the pedestrian in them that were just presented today are very helpful for someone like me, a non-architect, to just envision your project. And just moving forward, I encourage you to get those materials, not just to the board, but to the public, to kind of frame the discussion a little better rather than us viewing it 20 feet away in the moment. And so it helps the story or narrative a little bit better. So.
Do we have an opportunity to respond to Cameron's comments about the parking deck? Is that later on? Or is that, I know you're not asking a question, so I don't want to break form.
I'll ask the question, is that a parking deck, or sorry, a pool deck on the, is that what you're talking about on Henley?
Well, I was specifically speaking to the response to the design with the new structured bracing and landscaping, but I don't want to break form here, so.
Okay.
That is a pool deck to answer that question.
I think it's reasonable to respond to Cameron's comments as though they're a question.
Okay, I'll just say, Lindsay, if you don't mind going forward 2 slides. The discussion about bringing, or the suggestion to bring the fenestration and the language of the building above to the parking is actually where we were. Originally, it was a little more monolithic, and the feedback we got was create a clear base, introduce these step backs per the zoning to create distinct blocks, right? And so that's what we've done in response to both of those comments. So we've actually made a deliberate move away from bringing some of that down. The other consideration with the parking is, of course, we want a naturally ventilated garage in order to not introduce mechanical ventilation and the noise and issues that comes with that. So anyway, that's the reason that we have made a distinct break in the base. You'll notice that the color of the base is slightly darker to help differentiate that from the residential building, again, in response to the last round of comments.
But if your project was only a garage, then we would be expecting there to be some articulation to the garage more than what we're seeing today. And you're saying there was a time where you had it. What I was saying was there was actually the chance, similar to maybe something Perry mentioned or Suzanne mentioned about bringing that Henley Most Tower to the ground or some sort of articulation with that to actually engage the ground plane and engage the garage plinth rather than sit above. And I understand you're saying you're trying to create a base plinth, but after seeing what will be day one and just cars parked there before this meeting, I was preparing and I was trying to understand what could be. And that's, we're not sitting here trying to sit here and sketch and draw with you. It's just like bigger ideas of what we're seeing. And that engagement with the ground plane would start to break that massive scale of the garage and on that pedestrian experience or lack thereof on the street.
I would just say the challenge is we are not permitted per the zoning to bring the building to grade.
Right.
We are required that minimum 10-foot step back. So we're trying to balance all of these outside forces and provide a good design.
Right, and
Cameron, if I might, just I'm sorry to cut you off. I apologize. I'm not an architect. I'm a spreadsheet guy, right? And so you commented to that. One thing I do want to respond to an earlier comment you made was kind of the directional change versus the kind of randomness of the previous pattern to why we introduced this. So when we met with the neighborhood on May 1st, we presented 4 kind of directions for feedback, right? So a visual preference survey in which we showed mural type screening. We showed a landscape, so kind of growth landscaping coming over it. We showed more of a structured, what you see here type program. And then we showed more, I can't remember the fourth. I'm having a mind melt. I'm sorry. There was a brick kind of concept, a green. And so the 2 that received actually the exact same kind of dots on them were landscaping and then this visual pattern. Mm-hmm. And so for us, what we're trying to do, to Ben's point earlier, is respond to the zoning ordinances, respond to the DRB feedback, and respond to the neighborhood feedback that we received in real time in communication with the residents. So if there's been additional feedback, there's been multiple opportunities to provide that feedback.
Which one of these is this representing of the dots they gave you?
So what we did is we worked to incorporate both of those. So incorporating the landscaping, incorporating and then the visual pattern.
The structural
pattern,
structure. Right.
So
I don't know the appropriate term, I'm sorry.
The green on the building? Is that what you're talking about? The planters?
Correct. So we'd use more of a draping type landscape.
I'm always really weary of seeing that just because it's seasonal and it takes maintenance and all that sort of thing. So like, is that architecture when you're seeing
that was
drape greenery going over the garage?
Sorry to speak over you. The kind of the screen was made up, the visual preference was made up of multiple options, right? So we had like a green screen, if you will. So we'd use an ivy type product. It is a southern facing facade. And so again, this was really the directional feedback, that we were given. So we're,
it is south facing and unobstructed. So this is the chance to, in a lot of cases, it doesn't work. We think it does with the landscape architect's input.
What is the design intent of that, to screen your garage?
No.
So what is it doing?
In my mind, it's softening kind of the corners, it's softening the edges. If there's a kind of the image of the pool deck from the Henley Street Bridge, it's, we're bringing that, we're incorporating that landscaping spilling over the edge. So we're trying to soften the edges and also, again, continue to respond to the feedback we're getting.
There's a rendering closer up, is that right, of the Front Avenue experience?
You just clicked on the one from the Henley Street Bridge, that will have that. You can kind of see the green spilling over the edge here.
Yeah, it just seems like something's additive to solve an issue that has been created, is my opinion, with any greenscape draping over edges and softening and that sort of thing. I mean, landscape at the periphery and the pedestrian experience is very important. Again, that's my opinion. I think that we're at a point again where we're not trying to sit here and design it for you, and the steps forward today isn't designing it for you. It's deciding to what is the best path forward to get a product that is relevant for Knoxville and for this project. But like I said, I still don't think the project's there yet. Outright denying a project means you're just going to come back with a new project, with the project, and postponing it is kicking the can to let you all have some more time to work. And that's only relevant when you have adequate parameters to work with, or comment to work with, in my opinion. I'm not making a motion yet.
I've got a question. It was addressed in some of the comments, but part of the guidelines are the top middle base. I know you've got a contemporary design here, and you've got multiple heights. I agree with your, when you look at the guidelines, page 10, it talks about it. I mean, how are you addressing the top, if you will? I mean, I see how you're addressing the base on both front and hill, and the midsection. I'm just not sure. Could you describe in more detail? I mean, it's hard on the scale drawings to understand. But if you could talk a little bit about the top, that would be great.
Yeah, Lindsay, if you'll go to the view from the bridge, please. So top middle base in a traditional building is an understood thing. In a more contemporary building, you typically don't have a heavy cornice treatment at the top, right? Just different character. In this case, what we're suggesting is that obviously the base is set by the parking garage. The middle is the middle of the building. The top is more about the undulation of the roof line, right? It's the form of the building that breaks. It's not a straight bar building. It's actually got a terrace on that left bar of the building. The building beyond steps up, and then the tower steps up beyond that. So again, this is not an application for a heavy cornice and dental detail to terminate the top of the building. So we're treating it more holistically as the top of the building as it relates to a cityscape almost.
Did you say that there's a terrace on this side, the top right?
That's right. Yeah, you'll notice the gray bar beyond.
Yes.
That actually steps back. So this front, yep. So there's a roof terrace that exists on top of that white bar.
Okay. Is the cafe, you have the cafe on Hill Avenue that we saw last time. I know you added the retail on Front Avenue, or the future possibility of, which we've seen in this group before. Is the intent to build out that space day one as part of this project?
Correct. That would be open. There was a misstatement by an opposition member. That would be open, operating, and functioning. We would be supplementing that. I believe we talked last time at the previous DRB, in which it's our belief that this corner for retail will struggle today. So we will bring in that party to do that. That will operate through our property management company. That will be open to the public. Because of the step back, we've been able to introduce a patio, kind of outdoor space as well. And so that's correct. So it'll be open and running. It'll feel as if you're in the lobby. You've experienced this when you've been to most hotels or other things now.
Is there mechanical equipment on the roof?
Yes. Parapet wall screens, the mechanical equipment. We talked about this a little bit last time, but the height of the building still allows for conventional split systems. So condensers on the roof, there are no large package units or chillers or anything like that.
Is that your limiting factor for height? Or, okay.
No. Do you want to talk about the height?
Would you like for me to respond to the height comment, or? Yeah, height obviously continues to be a discussion, and I think it's really important. So for us, the construction methodology, right? So type 1A and type 1B. So what you see in the smaller building up on Hill is a metal stud product with a Pandex system. And then on the larger front side of the project. What we're using is type 1A. And so for us, what is the limiting factor on this property is largely geological. And so I would need a lot more time to kind of go through that, but we're happy to do that. But it's a very difficult site, and that was something that previous developers had not accurately understood when making other presentations, such as the T or other projects that you saw previously.
So just to clarify, are you saying that that site won't support a higher tower
With
structurally?
Structurally, it would take incredible enhancements to the site to make that work.
Hey, Cass, are you good? I'll say, obviously, this is a big project. We've received a lot of comment. This has stirred a lot of interest, both in favor and opposition. I think I agree you came back with a lot of, I appreciate the changes you've made, especially generally speaking, you addressed a lot of the things that I thought about, and I've appreciated that. I think that the changes and modifications are a drastic improvement to this project. I appreciate the diagrams you showed where you reduced the building and modified it and changed the form slightly. I guess in general, I'm thinking, we're supposed to, one of the staff comments was addressing the scale. I mean, I'm looking pretty heavily at the Bank of America building, which is, by blocks, the opposite block of this project. And I know the parking garages are different, but the heights of the building are pretty similar from what I've seen on these diagrams. I haven't studied that independently, but they seem pretty similar in height. And so when we're talking about adjacent properties of scale, I'm not talking about all the way down the river. I'm just looking at the adjacent property. So it is a big project, and I appreciate all the careful attention we've paid to it. So we're not here to design the whole project. I don't really have a closing statement. I'm just saying that, I think the city will require more detail on your landscape plan. I appreciated what you showed. You continue to show the trees. I appreciated the improvements on Front Avenue as this project does approach Front Avenue. And, as it's been noted, I mean, there are multiple parcels here, but you guys did combine and piece these together, and they do overlap two districts. So we're going by those challenges. We're studying those challenges. I'm sorry. We're having to weigh that as we go through the guidelines. So in general, I'm in favor of the scale, as that's something that we're supposed to talk about. But I don't want to sit here and go through, we could all design this thing with everybody here for a long period of time. So I don't know where that leaves us, but.
Thank you for that. I will continue that thought to say that I think the density is appropriate. I think that the scale issue is as much about the detailing and the human scale, the human experience next to this building, but also those folks on the bridge there. I don't think that a big building on the site is a bad idea. I just think that the things that it blocks and the lack of human scale elements is problematic. And that's what keeps me wanting to see a higher one side and a lower on the other side, of an actual bigger contrast between sides, to try to balance some of that. And same comment goes for the parking garage. I agree with Cameron that there's more work to be done there as far as connecting the top and base. There's a clear top and base, but they seem very disconnected right now, and I feel like that's problematic as well. I am just going to add a little bit of housekeeping that they are testing the building fire alarm at 6 o'clock, which will be an unpleasant experience for everyone. So we don't want to stifle the public process at all, but just for practical reasons, we should make an effort to wrap this up.
Would you put up the staff recommendation?
My thought on this is we postpone it, we'll get an incremental change. If I'm using the guidelines as a rubric, given my interpretation, it doesn't meet the guidelines fully and still needs work. And to actually get a message forward to be able to change this building, I motion to deny the project.
I have a procedural clarification. I can't remember when it was. Sometime last year, we had a design workshop for this project before it was submitted. Is that a follow-up workshop a viable option?
When there's an open application, that's the application in front of you guys, and it can't be workshopped. So it would have to be denied.
Is there any further discussion by the board?
I don't know that we have a second on that.
Okay, so that motion has failed without a second, and I will entertain another motion. I don't think I can make one myself.
I mean, I'm looking at the staff recommendation here. I'm also, okay, pedestrian level design with the neighborhood context. I'm interested in the board's discussion here. I think they've addressed that on Front Avenue. I think that's addressed on Hill. I stated in the first meeting that Locust is very, very steep, very steep. I don't imagine that being a very engaged, easily to engage that as a pedestrian experience in terms of retail and other things. There is landscaping involved, which once again will need to be more detailed when this is submitted formally for a permit, but I think they've addressed those concerns. So I'm just trying to start a dialogue amongst the board here.
Make a motion.
I'm starting a dialogue amongst the board.
All right.
Okay.
I agree with you. I think the opportunities for Front Avenue are way in the future, like well into the future, but not the too distant future. And the opportunity that they created is not going to impede that. It's actually, Front right now it's just an artery. But the potential to connect to World's Fair Park, to the university, I think that this has not impeded that. I do like the idea of possibly messing with the scale of the building that's closer to the Henley Street Bridge, because that's closer to the pedestrian experience of the boulevard that's trying to be created there. John, I agree with your comments about the number of buildings of scale. This is a slightly bigger. Nearby are numerous, including the Bank of America building, which is just right there, and including an empty parking lot across the street, which I imagine at some point will be developed. And yeah, so what I wrestle with is the scale against a future Nayland, a true boulevard, and what that would be like. But I think that this design addresses the hill in a way that I don't know that another design can.
I have a few statements that this isn't a motion, but I think I want to be very clear that there has been a lot of work done here, and I appreciate what it is like to balance the constraints of a site, the money, the constructability, the public input, the guidelines, the codes, the zoning. It's a lot. It's a hard task, and I appreciate that, and I understand it, and I think all of us here do. Having said that, I think I would recommend denying the project only because I think that frees us up to give you even more direct, specific input about how to get this right. And I think that that's important, especially for this project that's going to act as a precedent for our city. And I think the purview of this board is to protect the public interest of our city and our ideals. And we've had a public process to put these guidelines together, and it's very important to everybody here that we get this right. And so I'd like to suggest the path forward is denial and then a subsequent workshop.
I see Cameron's direction toward denial in terms of allowing workshop. Since we got lots of comment and things put in, if we could say, hey, take the tower to 20 stories and drop 2 off Henley, you'll be good. But that's not our role to design the building, and to keep postponing you and have you come back again and again and again. It's looking more like denial is the kindest and best path forward for both of us. So I guess I will take over Cameron's motion and make the motion for denial and to reworkshop it as soon as possible.
Second.
I would like to request a roll call vote for this.
Comment or questions on this denial. I mean, it's based on the comments of the parking garage. Is that what I'm hearing from? I mean, maybe the people that made the motion. Is that what I'm hearing that the concerns are?
Concerns are the garage articulation, the lack of ground level experience, the lack of contextual massing, the precedent it will set. What could it be in the future, because this is an aspirational project, and the gravity that this project states with that.
Yeah, on my end, it's just the distribution of scale. I like them. I like the scale. It's the distribution following the guidelines toward trying to articulate as multiple buildings when you have something this large, and you've done a good job of that with the setbacks and the 2 towers. I think that can go a little further to humanize the Henley side of it, and also really back to where does it land next to the pier and the arch needs to be resolved a little better, in my mind anyway.
I'll just go and say I'm not going to support the denial personally. I would be okay with the postponement because I'm not sure what a workshop does for this project versus what they can do by hearing this public comment and then coming together. They've met, they continue to, there's been open dialogue amongst the community on this project. So I'm not going to support it now.
I'm not either. I don't know how another workshop doesn't end up with us trying to design a building and get into certain design elements.
It feels like we're doing that right now. I mean, that's my opinion. And I really, if they workshop it, isn't it the same thing as them just coming back? I mean, we're just going round and round about this. And in the end, is it our right to deny it if they meet some of these criteria?
If they're meeting some of the criteria, but not all the criteria that the guidelines require.
I mean, I feel like they've met some of it. It feels like there's just a lot of different opinions. I don't like it. I like it. I know this is only my 3rd meeting, so feel like a bit of a fish out of water. But this feels really bureaucratic to me and long-winded. And I mean, we could do this all day. We could have more people come in who don't like it, or it blocks their view, or whatever the reasoning is, and nothing gets done. Which that's what this feels like to me, but that's just discussion among us.
My 2 cents are that it just needs the pedestrian perspective from the bridge, and I agree with Chris about workshops, but I'm also a non-architect, and so workshops for me are just keep telling you, as a resident, I care about safety, lighting, dogs, the community aspect. And so what I've said here, I would say again in a workshop. You have a lot of architects on this board that have earned a degree of respect from you to communicate that both ways. So I think my point is the scaling from the bridge, as Perry said, if that's addressed, but I'd agree with the postponement.
I would also probably agree with a postponement. I think that they've shown that they're willing to listen to the community in hosting the public meetings and hearing comment. They've clearly made adjustments to the design. Again, it's not quite there, but I would be in favor of a postponement.
We have a motion and a second, so we need to vote on that. Is there any other discussion? Okay.
Okay, to deny the application, Mr. Childress,
Aye.
Mr. Worsham,
No.
Mr. Ford,
No.
Mr. Bolin,
Yes.
Ms. Cole,
No.
Mr. DeBartoleben,
No.
Ms. Taravella,
Yes.
Mr. Thurman.
No.
That's 3 yes, 5 no.
I have a quick point
Thank you.
of order. With Suzanne serving as a chair, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, she's allowed to vote. Sorry. Yeah. That clicked in my head right after I said that. Sorry.
I wasn't going to unless he asked me to.
Quick question. Laura, if you don't mind, I heard some talk about that I've heard, but more dialogue, or more your opinion on the scale of the pedestrian experience on the Henley side.
Yeah, I walked that the other day, and I also walked Front again, and then came up Locust again, and I'm appreciating the workout again. But until you showed those renderings that's the first time I've seen your building from the perspective of the Henley Street Bridge and how close it comes and how tall it is. And again, I'm not an architect, but it seems like it can just be two recommendations that seem to agree with me would be to kind of shift that while maintaining, your volume or mass of the building, but kind of shift it away. So a view corridor is the term that a very smart architect told me once, that when you're coming down the bridge, you can see the Sun Sphere, you can kind of still see in the city, but it looked like, again, just from your rendering, if you're walking down that bridge, you just see building and not really the hint of the downtown Knoxville. And maybe it's the aspect of it, and I think it can be amended. I think I'm pretty positive moving forward, but that's what I would have said at a workshop, but I'm sure you would have shown more images. Does that clarify?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
That's great.
I would add too, kind of from a pedestrian experience, I run up the Neyland Greenway all the time. I have walked that Front Avenue. I tried to walk from Maplehurst all the way to the city county building, and Neyland Drive is a state route. I think it's aspirational to think that area is going to become a walkable area, but right now I can tell you crossing Neyland during a run is like you want to get across that as quick as you can because of the pedestrian experience and or lack thereof. And to Laura's point, I think it's kind of getting to both the scale of it from the pedestrian experience there, kind of at that level of Neyland and Front, and being mindful that is potentially, there's potential for that to be developed at some point, but I think realistically that is a state route. And so I think what they've done as far as having the potential for the retail is a decent compromise in the sense that it meets kind of where it presently is at.
So again, housekeeping wise, we have 4 minutes until we won't be able to hear each other. So would it be acceptable to take a short recess during that time?
I move that we recess until the fire alarms end.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Question about it. How long is it going to last?
Next week?
We don't know.
Is it?
I thought we were close to somebody motioning a postponement.
We have a motion on the floor right now, though. Of mine, to recess. I moved to recess, he seconded, so it requires a vote, not to be a stickler about rules. But I can remove that motion if you just want to keep moving forward.
I
3
think
minutes.
that it is wise to recess for, can we amend it to 10 minutes?
Okay. I amend my motion. I accept that amendment for 10 minutes.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Can we just wait till right after the thing to not lose momentum on the meeting? I mean, I just don't, if it's a 30-second thing, it doesn't seem to, I'd rather just wait it out, in my opinion.
I amend my motion to start immediately when the fire alarms start, take a 10-minute pause, and then
Yeah,
recess.
and we don't know. It may be testing off and on. They've not been clear. It's been
Okay.
somewhat out of our control.
Okay. All in favor?
What's the motion again? I'm
Okay,
sorry.
there is a
I'm just trying to-
motion to adjourn
Okay,
as soon as the fire alarm starts
Okay.
and to resume 10 minutes later.
okay.
And we have a second. Do you approve that second?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Okay, thank you.
Okay, I would state, are we in recess right now?
Wait for the alarm.
Yeah, okay, I would say that, like I said, I'm generally in favor of this project. I think they've made direction towards addressing concerns from the board the first time. Out of respect for other board members, I hear there's still some concerns about scale. Once again, I don't think those concerns, I don't want to speak for them, but, you know, if there can be some changes to that for everybody to feel more comfortable, I'd be open to seeing that. But I'd make a motion to postpone for a minimum of 30 days.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to postpone for a minimum of 30 days. Is there any further discussion? Let's do a roll call on this one too, please.
To postpone 30 days, Mr. Childress.
Aye.
Mr. Worsham.
Aye.
Mr. Ford.
Aye.
Mr. Bolin.
Aye.
Ms. Cole.
Aye.
Mr. DeBarnleben.
Aye.
Ms. Taravella.
Aye.
Mr. Thurman.
Yes.
It's 8-0.
Thank you. Thank you all for all your comments and hard work.
All right, thank you for taking over, Suzanne. I really appreciate that. When I've tested fire alarms in buildings like this, they come on for a few seconds, they come off, you don't know when they're going to do it, and they can be doing it for several hours. But normally, we'll just kind of, I recommend, unless someone has a motion, that we just kind of keep rolling and pause when it's alarming and stop. Because often the alarm only goes on for a few seconds. And it can, for a building this big, it can take hours to test the whole system. So,
What happens to the motion that was voted on
what motion?
to recess for,
We just agreed that once the fire alarm started, that we would take a 10-minute recess, which I actually still ask, just because we've been going for 2 hours. And so,
Oh, okay. Do you want to just take a recess in general?
We can start when the fire alarm starts.
Oh, just when the fire alarm
I think
starts?
we're all on the.
Okay, okay.
yeah, For 10 minutes. and
Sorry,
then-
I thought that had died. Where are we? We are at 516 West Vine Avenue, 4E24DT.
Okay, so similar to the
Hold on.
last.
Yeah.
Are you okay?
I want to make sure he was here.
Oh, good. I will allow the applicant to do the majority of the presentation, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about the summary of the scope of work, and I'll touch on some of the revisions. So this is a proposed new 5-story residential construction. It's proposed for a rectangular site, the intersection of Vine and Locust. It currently has the Carpenters Union building and a surface parking lot. This building is L-shaped, and it extends the full length of the parcels along Vine and Locust, and there's a surface parking lot recessed behind the building. The site layout, these elements have not changed since the last building, and I'm happy to run through those. In terms of the design elements, some of these have been revised since their previous submission. The flat roof building now features brick veneer cladding on the first and second stories. You can see that here in particular on this Vine Avenue elevation. The third through fifth stories are clad in painted cement board that are arranged in alternating bands of vertical panels and additional vertical panels shown there. There is also some additional cement board siding of a different texture on that corner elevation. There have been some revisions that I submitted to the board members to build out this additional elevation here, that entryway. I'll let the applicant break down those, and I'll run through some of the comments. So this property was previously zoned DKG, but it was rezoned by the applicant in 2022. The DKB subdistrict permits buildings with residential uses on the ground floor. So that's the differentiation there. The application includes approximately 18 spaces on a new parking lot. Okay. So is that, you guys want to take a break?
So I guess that officially puts us in recess for 10 minutes. Going to resume our board meeting, and it looks like everybody's here. So Lindsay, please go ahead.
Okay, I'll just finish up on the comments. Overall, the access point, I'm back talking about the parking here. The access point meets the guidelines as it creates one curb cut on the sidewalk, and it won't create additional safety issues for pedestrians. It meets the design guidelines as it's located to the rear of the building. The final site plan should meet city engineering standards. Overall, the guidelines encourage that pedestrian scaled environment from block to block, avoiding blank walls along street-facing elevations. In this application, it avoids blank walls via a series of double hung and fixed windows on the Vine elevation, with windows and sliding glass doors on the Locust Street elevation. The guidelines also recommend the modules, the recognizable base, middle, and top. This design has details typical to contemporary multifamily buildings, using vertical bands to break up a massing along a brick base and a parapet-topped roof line. The revised design incorporates additional masonry to further define a base. The project doesn't include public uses on the first story. The guidelines do speak to incorporating first floor uses that engage pedestrians and draw walk-in traffic. The staff report discusses other fully residential buildings that were recently approved by the board. Guidelines do also recommend creating a consistent rhythm of entrances and windows along ground level elevations. There is a consistent rhythm along Vine Avenue. There is only one door accessing the sidewalk, which is that secondary single light door. There are no entrances on the Locust Street elevation. And the applicant has provided a revised drawing that you guys see in front of you here, responding to that comment. In terms of materials, guidelines recommend the use of materials that relate to the scale, durability, color, and texture of the predominant building materials. As previously discussed, the surrounding area is characterized by the use of brick masonry. Fiber cement panels don't demonstrate that same durability or detail as historic masonry. The revised proposal includes 2 levels of brick masonry on the primary elevations, and then additional on the rear elevations as well. That's in response to the guidelines and the staff recommendation. So the board should discuss these materials. So overall, the staff recommendation is that the board should discuss whether the revised materials meet the guidelines related to scale, durability, color, and texture. The board should also discuss the building's ground level pedestrian engagement within the context, and approval should be subject to the following conditions: that the final site plan and parking lot meet engineering standards, the landscaping plan meet standards of the zoning code and design guidelines, mechanical equipment or service utilities be placed on secondary elevations and receive screening as necessary, and the signage to return to the design review board as a separate application.
Thank you for that, Lindsay. Please state your name and address, and you may speak.
All right. Hi there again. I'm Orrin Yarbrough. I'm with Design Innovation Architects. Address is 402 South Gay Street, Suite 201. Yeah, sorry for that life moment, I guess. I tripped a hurdle, I guess, you know. Running, that's always something that you got to watch out for. If you trip a hurdle, good luck with the rest of your race. So wish me luck. Starting here at the first slide, I'll just jump right into it. So there are some minor changes actually that did have happened to the landscaping plan since this, mostly addressing doing a second pass at the screening and the adjustment of tree locations to make sure that they weren't impeding views towards any storefront or any balconies that were along the Locust side or in the courtyard side. We also addressed upsizing one particular tree that was a canopy tree and looking again at the screening around the mechanical equipment. The mechanical equipment didn't really change much, but we gave it another pass, did a look at the gates. So next slide. Here, when we went back and regrouped with our team, we took a deep dive into the materials of the adjacent neighborhood around us. And, you know, there's a lot of variation in the brick around us. There's a lot of different scales of brick, a lot of different colors of brick. There's blank facades. There's facades with big windows, facades with little windows, facades with tons and tons of little windows, or just big giant ones. And there's a lot of variation in the brick, and some's monolithic, some is not. So what we got from that is there's a lot of variation. But we also did see that an overall idea is that the palette is a warmer and lighter tone, minus one maybe particular neighbor, but most of it is a lighter, warmer tone. So that's where we moved into our redesign and of the ground floor brick bays. And so next slide, this is just kind of playing into what we talked about earlier with the landscaping, looking at the Boulevard District. We added, for context purposes from the last meeting, we added our landscaping into the model so that it's very obvious for everybody what you're actually seeing, not just on the plan. You can actually see it in the 3D renderings when we're moving forward. It's a little bit washed out, but there's also like the adjustment showing the screening and whatnot. But while we were back on that aerial view, one thing that's worth noting is, aside from the mechanical screening that's down there at the courtyard side, we also have our mechanical equipment on the roof that is going to be screened from the parapet. And there is a potential, we are in active conversation with KUB, that one of our site equipments might be going away and not be necessary. So the screening might actually get smaller and be added for more lawn in the future. But this is the current design, and that's based off of what we know as a known condition. Next slide. Looking at the 2D elevations that we have for the building, here at the courtyard, the rear of the building, you'll see the red metal panel. That's a reveal style metal panel that we have on the facade of the building, framed by the portal element, and then also on it itself. We have now placed brick at higher elevations that complement the adjacent buildings around us, since a large number of those were primarily viewed to be two-story facades, aside from the gigantic tower beside us. Most of them are two-story. And on the courtyard side that we have in the rear, it is framed by two bookend elements that actually step back, so that lower one story of brick we preserved while we added brick elsewhere and gave it that warmer tone and increased it along all of the other more pedestrian-oriented areas. In this courtyard, we felt that it was nice to preserve that accent brick, since it's making a bit of a surprise little peekaboo in the bays as you go throughout the building. So next slide. You'll see that. And so that's the other half of the courtyard right there. And then, as it steps in, you see the taller, warmer brick. And then next slide. Here along Vine, you'll see that that's where we have a large number of the modular double window bays with the warmer brick tones now that are pulled in. And we have the accent brick that's used in the courtyard that's at up to the first windowsill all along the street for pedestrians. And so by doing that now, you don't have, it's all a masonry brick material all along the grade edge and as you're walking down the path. And here as well, when you look at Locust, we have the same modular bay orientation that is stepping down the site with the balconies, and we made sure to show our screening this time that is included in that in those elevations. But similarly, we have the 3 stories of the cement board that is carried throughout with the 2 stories of the brick that's down below, with some accent cement board and accent brick in the middle of those bays. Next slide. This is the start of some more of our 3D renderings. This is just to show you this is what Walnut and Summit view would be looking at the backside of the building here, and you would see basically it proves that it's showing, or at least it's trying to show that the scale of the back of the rear of the building, that you don't really actually get a direct view of the courtyard from there. Next slide. I don't even know if my time ran out or not, but here along Vine, the primary thing to gather from this street view right here is the increased scale and placing the brick at something that complements the row houses directly across the street from us. Also in the tone of the row houses across the street from us, the double window bays that complement the row houses across the street, and just carrying that same formality down Vine. Next. This is one of the ones that we made sure that we included in this, and that is the entrance that is at Vine Avenue. The signage is just for window dressing, but it is close to something that I would like to do, maybe scale-wise. But we also pull in the red metal panel with the reveal panels We have increased, added some skylights and transom to increase the glazing along that. And we pulled in a lighter brick tone over this bay, unlike the other setback bays that have the darker accents, so that we could highlight this entrance with some planters and larger sidewalks. Primarily, you get the view of this entrance through the big giant red portal above you. So the close-up is just to kind of reinforce that. Next, here, this is just a nice view of the side of Locust and Vine, but you can see the side setback yard that is per the DK, the Boulevard District with the landscaping that we have that is per our landscaping plan, and the stepping of the balconies as you go down Locust. We have changed this facade with the fins at the top, no longer do that kind of whole thing over to the side to let more light into the balconies on the upper levels, but primarily this facade, other than the brick bays, it stayed the same in formality. Next. And here you'll see the screening at the balcony that again, we've included. The big thing to take away from this is similar to the other elevations that we tried in the past, is that it may look like it's only like a story and a half, but that's probably 2.5 stories worth of brick and scale because of the way that the grading steps down as we go towards Cafago. Next. And then we'll end here. This is the courtyard view. This is showing, we're attempting to really kind of reinforce the landscaping that we have in the landscaping plan to show that entry element and like the quasi plaza that is like a part of the Boulevard District, to allow for something that is like a kind of moment for pedestrians that are walking through this area. At the same time, we have the screening of the trees, so there are a lot of elements in here, but we faded them back so that you can at least see the building. Here you get a better view of the two bookended sides of the higher warm tone brick with the middle courtyard piece that's the lower one-story brick, and aligning with either side of the red metal ribbon is the storefront that we have increased on this side, in addition to increasing it on the Vine entry.
All right. Well, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
And your thorough set of re-renderings. Is there any opposition that would like to speak, or anyone else that would like to speak on this?
Ferris E. Design Innovation Architects. What I can do is just wait to see what questions you may have, and we can address them together.
Thank you, Ferris. Well, then I would like to open this up for board discussion. Oh, Joe, would you like to speak?
Yeah. Since there was no opposition, I'm going to represent the whole of the public and say they're for this project. Just kidding. Okay. No, I wanted to make sure that we, in our presentation, were clear that we heard you the first time around. It was a long time between the original workshop, Joe Petrie, 900 South Gay Street, sorry. And so I think we missed some on our presentation in not addressing the issues that we had from the workshop to the first presentation. And so I think we've done a much better job, but I would take responsibility for not having done that the first time around. So I wanted to reiterate that we heard your response. We tried to respond to that through the tone of the brick, to the raising of the brick, the landscaping plan. You didn't really have it in time last time to analyze it. We've tried to do better than is required in the landscaping plan. And then, the scale, we tried to add the models, the pedestrian models to show what we've done there. As I look at the applicable guidelines, and when I was on the committee and when I was on the steering committee, I think it's great that this board now presents all the applicable design guidelines. That's helpful to us. It's helpful, I think, in your analysis. And so what I tried to do was go through all that Lindsay had stated as applicable and just, check off or put yeses in what how we complied. And I found that the vast majority, we were able to say yes. If there was something, there were a couple things that were not really relevant, as there always are, because you state the whole of each category. And so we've tried to comply to each of those. I want you to know as developer that we are, through a course of a project, our intent is to make it better. And so your guidance is helpful to us because we think this is better than what we started with. And where we can make it better, we want to. And things like the screening of the elements and the switchgear and things like that, whatever we can reduce with KUB, we will take away, right? And so we would much rather have better landscaping than better screens around our utilities. The other thing we didn't do, and Josh, you pointed this out last time, that landscaping is not to hide problems. And I personally did a very bad job interpreting that last time. What I was trying to say is that we had screened and then we complemented with landscaping, but we didn't show that. And so we have this iteration. And so some of that is just simply my fault. It's my responsibility to be clear and concise and let you all know how we were responding. And I think we've tried to do a much better job. I hope we've done a much better job of not only complying, but showing you how we've heard what you said and tried to comply. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Seeing none, I will open it up for the board discussion.
I had a quick question for Orrin. I appreciated I appreciated that study you did, that photographic study. That was really good and a helpful part of the submission. Thank you. How did you, I think you said this, but I couldn't quite catch every part of it. How did you change the, I see some of the materials you've added more brick. What did you change? Did you change the color palette? Because you mentioned there was a lighter, you sort of noticed that everything was a little lighter in terms of tone. Did you change other colors, or did you change the tone of the brick, the color of the brick, or in
For
terms
our
of the
building in
color? Yeah, in terms of this new submission.
Yeah, so originally we had predominantly a lot of what we are now referring to as the accent brick, that darker gray, and then we had a slightly lighter gray. Yeah, it's actually in the middle of the courtyard right there, like at the low end. Yeah. And so that was the primary color at the entire base before, and we had light accent gray used very sparingly. And so that kind of went out the door with just the whole neutral palettes. And so that this new lighter, warmer brown that we're using is a completely new material that we brought in altogether, and we just abandoned having two-tone of dark and light gray.
But it is brick, right?
It is brick.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, good, thanks.
I have a quick question as well. So with the balconies, one thing that I've noticed, and even the project that you've referenced on in the packet, where you've kind of got all the different projects you're referencing, like Church and Henley, for example, the underneath of those balconies, what are you, of the balconies, what are you planning to do as far as finishing underneath those, and what's the material of the balcony?
So they will be a treated wood, but they're going to be painted to match the underside of the composite decking. So it'll be a dark material. You won't see any raw wood from the underside like you might at another building downtown.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate Joe's comments. I appreciate the work that you guys did to make modifications. I agree your renderings of the landscaping help improve the feel, I mean, the sort of experience. I appreciate the addition of the brick. You know, I mean, the more brick and the color change too. So personal opinion, me speaking, not as a board, that's the way the board and batten sort of 4x8 sheets is the sort of the least durable approach to fiber cement in my mind. But I think you've addressed the durability of the building in general, and so I'd make a motion to approve per staff recommendations.
Can we have some more comment first?
Well, there's a motion. We got to have a second, and then we can discuss.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there further comment?
Yeah. I just wanted to start with any of my comments from before and now was really because of again, a precedent's being set with this, and also we're demolishing a building to make this, so we've got to make sure that what is taking its place, of course, it's a completely different building, but all of that embodied energy and everything about that project is now leveled and thrown in the dumpster. So when we demolish buildings, we've got to take that much extra care for what we're putting back and thinking about how this project can last that much longer, similar to the building that we took away. Question first, and I appreciate the brick being added. What kept, I understand there's a lot of grade change, but what kept you from striking one or two regulating lines at the top of brick and keeping that consistent rather than having it undulate throughout the design? Because the reason I asked, just to finish, there's some oddities when it cups the bottom of some of the windows and balconies that I feel like are going to be an odd detail to pull off. So I'm just interested in that, if that could be a possible formal study.
In our team, we've actually discussed the possibility of having like a horizontal band of some sort, but I think that we all, at least in our team, agree that the weight of how much there is at the tops of those larger double height bays feels very comfortable right now. Now, granted, the coping and how that terminates into the cement board at the top can be addressed in an ornamental way that I think could help reinforce that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean a reveal or anything. I just meant the tops of the brick change a lot as you go around the building. I was just asking, is there...
Oh,
there's a lot of there's a lot of variability
Yeah,
in that. And when it gets to a window, it barely goes above it, but it stays below it in other areas. I was asking because of
and
the
so like I'll
the
point out
grade.
right here on this view right here, the reason why is if you actually look at on the left side and then you look at the right side, the amount of steps is the amount the grade changes.
Right, and I was trying to finish. I understand that there's grade. It's just that there was a choice to, I think, bring it, like on the very right side, it comes up, or actually if you click to another image, there's some that just go barely under a window. Actually, one more over. Yeah, like the ones around the fiber cement on the right-hand bay. If there was a choice to strike a line in a certain datum, I'm just saying if there's a way to keep it under those windows and keep it horizontal, I think it'd make for a more successful articulation at the top of those, of the brick. Again, because of the potential tricky detailing at that. To your comment about the scale and durability of the brick, I appreciate that. I would just challenge that now the contrast of the white, black, and red are a bit foreign, and maybe consider warming that palette as well of the fiber cement to where it has a congruent reference to that material around it. I know there is the Endicott brick across the street in the dark and all those sort of things, but I think even just a desaturation of those stark colors may help it as a whole be a nicer project. And echoing John, that was one of my comments. I think in the whole spirit of how can fiber cement be of the scale, durability, color, all that of masonry, I think that your metal panel with the reveal is actually more in kind to what you're seeing with the concavity of the brick mortar joint than you do with a board and batten applied face panel or panelized fiber cement system. So I'd love to see those actually become, they can be large panels, or sorry, they can be panels, but be reveal panels with reveal joints rather than applied battens and that sort of thing. I think that's starting to get more towards how can another material read with the same texture and weight of a brick building. You keep referencing Church and Henley. I don't like that project. I don't think the applied flatness of it is really nice. I think your project could be a representation of how it could be done better with the thought on the detailing of that fiber cement.
Just to clarify, the white is fiber cement, right?
The white is fiber cement, and it's white graphically for this, for the purposes of this. It's more like a slight off gray. You know, it's not going to be pure white.
Pure white.
That would age probably and show a lot of dirt not too well.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
I have a few more comments.
More comments.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
If Lindsay doesn't mind scrolling through one of the images that shows the east elevation, I think it is. One more. Sorry. There was one, and I noticed the same thing Cameron did, where the brick came just like a teeny bit up under the windowsill on either side and then back down. Anyway, it was irregular, and I agree that having a consistent line all the way around at some determined level would be nice instead of the up-down. I was just going to second
You're
that
probably
comment.
referring to that bookend element that's, you can kind of see it to the right of this view.
Oh, it's a
and
very
then-
far right,
And
yes.
then the east elevation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. And then I was also going to comment that I like the proportion that you have on the white panel now, that it's not a true 4x8. It's like a more finely grained vertical, and I appreciate that change.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just say that inside corner is your front door, and that's the part that faces Summit Hill, which is the impetus of the Boulevard District. And hopefully that courtyard could get infilled more and more to create an actual space. But we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
Can you remind me what the motion was?
It was to approve per staff recommendations. Okay, we can vote. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you.
And that is
Thank
the.
I move to adjourn.
Yeah,
Per,
yeah, we
need
don't
a
have to move to adjourn.
it's Robert's Rules of Order.
We don't actually have to follow them exactly. We're allowed to.
We used to when I read the minutes back to the Overlook project. We used to move to adjourn.
Yeah, and then we changed that. But yes, let's adjourn. Thank you.